Welcome to Wear Your Cape to Work, a podcast hosted by Project Insight. We believe that project and program managers are the real superheroes of every organization. We want you to hear their stories so you can be inspired to wear your own cape to work. In this episode of Wear Your Cape to Work, Matthew and I are going to talk about all of the best parts from the episodes in season 2. If you've missed any of our shows, you're going to want to tune in and hear all the highlights from superhero PMs from companies like Amazon, USAID, and NASA. Tune in. We're excited to get going. Hi, Matt. It's just us. It's so weird to get on here and have it just be you and I. There's nobody in the middle. It's just kind of the regulars, but welcome back to Wear Your Cape to Work. I'm glad we can be together and talk about a great season.
Yeah, it definitely does feel a little, the window's a little bigger and,
That's true.
as far as that's concerned. But yeah, no, what a wonderful season. Season 2 wrapped, and what a great group of project managers and leaders that we were able to speak with over the last little bit.
Yeah, we've been really lucky, for all of our listeners. Thank you for joining us over this great season 2. Yet again, another season with so many people from so many different industries and so many different amazing super skills and superpowers and talents that they bring to their workplace. We started off, as you probably all remember, with an episode with a program manager from NASA who had worked for many, many years before there were project management tools even in place, which was a real eye-opener for me. Steve was one of the co-hosts on that episode. And as we talked with Jeff, we really were amazed at what it would be like to do project management with no PPM tool, right? No notification that you have a task due, no collaboration tools, no virtual meetings, literally driving to another location to have a meeting, on the weekly basis with a certain group of people, and couriers taking your project signature paperwork to another office. I mean, it was just amazing.
It's wild to think about, even, the idea that you don't have a PPM tool to keep this together, but you don't even have a Teams thread or an email. Yes. You know what I mean? Like
text message. I'm coming. I'll be there in 5.
Exactly. You're grabbing your bundle of paper, which is going to dictate whether or not this is successful. And you're going to the next place to have that meeting, right? It's amazing.
Well, and the wild part about that is that, Jeff's superpower really was that talent for precision. If you think about it, if we just all stop and pause like we sometimes do, you're building the International Space Station, or you're gearing up for payload projects or rescue landing sites. I mean, these projects had no room for failure, and they weren't being executed in some of the high-tech, automated tools that kind of had that audit trail and check boxes and everything built in. You're just doing that by the strength and gumption that you've got. It's amazing.
It really is. Every time I think about this episode, it gives me like flashbacks to pictures I've seen on Reddit or anything of like these big drafting rooms, and everybody has blueprints on it and they're going through, right? Where it's like, oh my gosh, this is how it was done before. How amazing. So
yeah, the movies, right? Apollo 13 and running down the hall to get all the duct tape and weird things that they could build the rescue return with that they had on the space shuttle. Oh my gosh, so crazy.
Right.
Anyhow, that was super great. We were so excited to have Jeff, and just happened that he's my cousin. It was a great connection, but he really, I think, enjoyed that reflection on the past and taking in, what had really been accomplished over his career. Project managers don't always take that retrospective look about what their career path has been like. And it's been nostalgic for a lot of people that we've had on the episode. I'm skipping ahead, but David Doty was one of our guests later. I can't remember exactly what episode it was, but it was called It Takes Courage. And David came having helped stand up a new school district in Utah. And as we talked about the amazing mountain of work and scrutiny, public scrutiny that he was under with a lot of naysayers and just incredible mountains of projects to complete in a year to get a whole school district up and running, I think he really took note and, said, oh yeah, taking inventory, this really is a courageous project that I was a part of.
Yeah, his lessons learned on his career was like, oh my
Yes.
gosh, this is so great.
Yes.
He really did. Poor
Hmm.
David, obviously willingly wanted to go in and be that change
Yes.
agent, but really stepped into such a messy situation with community
Hmm.
upset and,
Hmm. Hmm.
just everybody kind of looking at him to be that either scapegoat for the
Right,
bad
right.
feelings or the we need you to do all of this, and he really
Right.
delivered, honestly. So
He did. He did.
yeah,
Some of the things that I took away from that episode that I think about quite a bit is just the courageousness. I mean, I know we titled it "It Takes Courage" because there was a moment in that episode where both you and I were like, holy cow, you had to be so brave. Like he was alone. Like now, after that episode, he wrote all over LinkedIn that, he had to credit all these other people, but we weren't saying that no one else was involved. What we were saying
sure.
was he was like this solitary leader who stepped up and said, hey, I'll take ownership of this whole project and bring all these people along with me. So that it was so brave. It was so brave. And then I loved the part about his dad. For those of you who didn't catch the episode yet, his father attended one of we'll just call it a kickoff meeting, right? In
Yeah.
education projects, you don't have the same kind of kickoffs, but it was a kickoff meeting, so to speak, at like a community forum where everyone came to, speak their mind, sort of wish him well, but tell him what they needed him to accomplish on their behalf as well. Bus companies and, all the different types of stakeholders that were part of the community. And his dad, after the forum was over, greeted David, shook his hand and just said, good luck. Good
Yeah,
luck, son. It's
I
going to be
know.
quite a ride. But what an amazing accomplishment. And that wasn't his only accomplishment, right? The episode later goes
Yeah.
on to how his passion for underprivileged communities and students that, need a little extra help and assistance, is so alive within him, and then taking on some of the leading of coursework for incarcerated adults. I mean, he just goes
Right.
on and on from project to project to project.
Infrastructure, right? They inherited
Right.
all of these old
That's
buildings that
right.
they
That's
had to
right.
retrofit as they went
That's right.
through.
I forgot about
Yeah.
that.
I,
Oh,
I,
it's
one of the other neat things was I think you got to see David, right? As you were traveling
yes, yes,
through. If you're
yes.
not following Trina on LinkedIn, follow, and you could see the picture of them together, right? I think that was
Yeah,
really
that was
neat
super
also.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
do follow us on LinkedIn. You'll get to meet and greet with some of our guests. In fact, that's the real joy of having LinkedIn as a networking place. If you've enjoyed someone's episode, definitely reach out, say hello, introduce yourself, become a connection. We're all bringing each other such great mentorship and advice and, rubbing our, ideas together. It's very nice to have that community of networking project managers. And all of our guests have said they'd love to meet and greet with our audience. So, another early episode that we had was another admirable endeavor. Lucas King was part of our show in episode 2, and he came to the show telling us a little bit about what it's like to manage global aid projects. He was working at the time for a company called DAI, which was a contractor for USAID. And, that episode happened right about the same time that many of those budget cuts came down the pipe for USAID. And quite a few of that organization staff and the contractual teams that help were all let go or laid off or furloughed. And Lucas came during that very tumultuous moment to basically talk about that, right? He was telling us, in these international and global development projects, there are so many moving variables at all times. You could be having this great plan that's set in action and then become a war-torn country, or have, a
Right.
crazy disease impact, or, like this happened, budget cuts and, donor changes. It was amazing to think that the carpet could be pulled out from under you at any time. Those of us in corporate America, that happens on a different kind of scale, but this
Yeah.
was large.
It really is. It's not even your carpet, it's the whole room goes with it, right? Like you're
Right,
just
exactly.
you're done for. I really appreciated the intensity of how many different stakeholders had
Oh,
that
that's right.
power with what he did as
Yes.
well, right? It wasn't just
Hmm.
kind of where we are now, and with the furloughs and everything. Obviously that's a big driver, but it's the different governments or the specific,
Right.
regional members or the
Yes,
community
yes.
members as a whole, right? Um,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, yeah,
He was talking about that. I've forgotten. Thanks for bringing it up. But the different stakeholder groups, two different countries, possibly maybe more involved, the stakeholders in the US side, donorship stakeholders, people in the country that was being supported who were maybe, boots on the ground, but also, like you said, the people receiving some of this aid, like so many different groups and translating and being a part of that. I was so glad to hear that, well, for those of us who think about that work, are you always a project manager who gets to go to those countries?
right.
Sometimes that work, even though it was super important and mega valuable and so impactful in the country, maybe you're a project manager that's not even going to see that in person. He did get to go. He told us about some of those stories, but that would be tricky to work like that, where you're doing all this work and you don't quite get to see the fruit of your labor.
Yeah, it's not quite the same in the digital format of here's your
Right.
photos or here's the
Yes. Right.
briefing,
Right. Right.
right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The
One
briefing.
one of the things I also really appreciate about Lucas specifically is that he didn't have his PMP, right? He was out there really doing all of this and getting it done, and then he just recently did acquire that. But just to think of the scale of what he was managing as an informal, in quotes, kind of project manager is quite amazing.
It's
So
super cool. It really was a privilege, again, like all of our guests, to run into people who are doing such amazing work all over the world, or here in the States and for all over the world. It felt great to be connected to him. We had a couple customers of Project Insight on, which was a
yeah.
super treat. We've had many customers who we get to see every day, but we wanted to introduce them to the rest of the world. Linda Goodrich from Curis was on in episode 3. And then we had Lisa Hames from Rimkiss in episode 4, both our customers. Linda's episode was just so neat because she's, the VP of delivery at Curis. And yet she has this lead from within your team attitude. She totally can bring the rigor and organization, but she talked about in her episode what her real superpower was to see her people and understand what their strengths were and match their passion to their purpose at their company, and how big an impact that makes in an organization when everybody's plugged into the right role.
Really, it scales everything, which is what they've seen growth wise, right, under Linda's stewardship, as far as that's concerned. So she's such a thoughtful leader in that way. It's wonderful, honestly.
Yeah, when she came to the organization, it's kind of fun because she was working for another company that sent her there to work as a consultant in their project space. And then I think, if I remember right, the story goes that Curious just kind of stole her. They were like, "Come work here and stay here. We want to keep you." And then she decided to really tackle a lot for them. This idea of forecasting and understanding project complexity and tracking capacity of your teams. That ties into, knowing your team well. If you understand people's passions and their purpose, well, what can they accomplish? In this, once you get them in that perfect position that's tapping into their strengths, what is their capacity and how can you gauge their capacity over projects and over years of projects and multifaceted work so that you don't burn out your teams and, give real-time visibility into their bandwidth.
Yeah, provide the delivery part of her role, right, at the highest
Mm-hmm.
level possible through that matching of skill and placement, really. So,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
amazing because not everybody balances that rigor and that, I'm just going to call it care. She marries them so well together that Curious is super successful. I mean, she in one moment can be talking about, okay, we need to put a dollar value on this meeting and who's going to be a part of it so we don't waste any money, and I want to have this data actionable so that we can, make the right decisions for delivery timelines and our sales commitments. And we need all the project data to do that. But in the same breath, then, talking about how they provide a customer experience and even taking someone, from a team that she really wanted on a team, but needing to put them on another team because their passions were just more geared to that. I mean, it's just a really authentic, devoted, leader, and they're lucky to have her.
Agreed. We're lucky to work with her as well, just as we are Lisa, as far as that's concerned, right?
Yes, yes. And you've had a chance to work with Lisa pretty closely. I loved that episode. I continue to think of Lisa's little self, her 7-year-old self waking up in the morning. For those of you guys who didn't hear that episode, Lisa had a passion for checking things off. It gave her such peace to check off her to-do list that when she was even little at 7, she would wake up, write down, wake up, and check it off. And it brought her such joy.
Every time I see a list that one of my little girls makes, it makes me think of Lisa immediately at this point, because it's so wonderful. I also really appreciated, this idea that I'm making these lists and I'm checking these pieces off, but how that has let her elevate her roles within organizations, right? Where she went from basically being, an assistant project manager to a PMO leader, specifically through that organization and through that thoughtfulness. Just splendid, really. So
yeah, that was one of her pieces of advice to future PMO leaders or someone who's taking on a PMO leadership role, just to trust your instincts and to stay organized. You could tell that if you can keep yourself organized, that path can just seem so much more at ease. So, we had titled her episode, The Peace of Organization, that in many layers, right? Just the joy of checking something off, but that at easiness that you get when you really are on top of your game. And, one other thing that I noticed about her, and I notice about a lot of our guests, is that most of the time they undersell themselves to themselves. And the rest of us are noticing that they're just unbelievable people in the work that they're doing for their company. Lisa came and was like, oh, I don't know. I'm not really that great. And, I haven't done all that much. And I don't know. And meanwhile, she's taking, classes with Amerigo Pinto about, major PMO initiatives and how to do it. And she thought, oh, I don't know if I'm doing it right. She's obviously doing it right. Really well.
Right. Yeah. Her check of what she's completed is this long and she's speaking to it like it's this. But I do think that that's kind of a common theme with a lot of the people that we speak with, where they get put into these positions where they rise to it.
Yes.
As opposed to, kind of standing there and saying, I can do all of these things, right? So,
yes, that was something that Renee Clayton brought up in her episode later in the season. Renee is a leader at Byte Strategies, and she's worked in financial IT projects for a long time. And she has a serious passion for AI and has been dabbling in it since 2016. But I digress. My point was that when she came to our episode, she was saying, look, every role I've taken before I even knew what it was. I don't really know the whole scope. Just dive in, be curious, get engaged. And you know what? It was amazing that sentence really is her. It's so her, because even with AI, she's like, I don't know, let's just try it. Let's try all this stuff. And she uses work as a playground. I mean, that was really, exciting. It was a really great way to look at work. So if you missed that episode, you need to get, that contagiousness, for yourself. If you're feeling like work is a little ho-hum, Renee really made us all think, this is like going to play around at work, see what can happen.
Really, or if you're unsure of what your next steps look like professionally, even, right? Where you're kind of, I could stay doing this, or maybe I don't want to go for that initiative because I don't quite have all of the list of things that they want. I think that speaks to the idea that, no, you can learn some of these things as you go, right?
Yeah, she is a pioneer for sure. We called her episode pioneering AI for project leaders. She was an early adopter and she just jumps right in. And when you talk with her, about AI and her advice on how to use it and dig in and how to stay relevant and how to get comfortable with tools and how to, keep going with the flow. Some of us get tired. We're like, okay, I learned this already. Is there really have to be something new? But her curiosity about all of that was very exciting. Now, I don't want to minimize the fact that she takes it very seriously too, right?
Right.
She talked about, emotional intelligence and artificial intelligence and how to bring those closer together. She talked about ethics and compliance and, why you have to really stay in the loop and how to be a good steward of the technologies that we have available to us.
Yeah. And I also appreciated the idea that she really, I feel like, looked at it as technology that's available to us to interact with. It's not this idea that while I can create an avatar of myself and have it give these kind of productivity enhancements, it's still something that we're reviewing and looking at. And the real world applications that she provided during that episode, I think, were really strong to have a good understanding of where AI is now and where it will be in the near future as well.
Yeah, she talked about all the acronyms, right? AI,
Yeah.
LLM, ML, everything, IoT. We just went on and on. So if you need an acronym test, you need to jump in on that one. It was really great. Before we talked with Renee and before David, we had an episode with Charlene Reynolds, who, while isn't titled project manager, has been a project and program and portfolio manager her whole career. She is the director of the John Wayne International Airport right here in Orange County, California. And she was on our show talking about how she views project work and how she has really climbed through her career by taking on undesirable projects. It was that episode where you're reminded, hey, if you want to get more involved or you want to elevate your game or get promoted or take on the next thing, you need to raise your hand. I can just hear her saying it. Raise your hand for that, abandoned project or for that work that nobody else wants to do and do it really well. And she really did that.
She really did. And one of the things that really resonated with me in that episode is as she was coming up through the ranks, the idea that, people were still apprehensive to having women in the workforce women in leadership. And it was, not 1940 or something like that, right?
Right.
We're talking, 2000, the 2000s. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then that was just such a fun, part of it, because as we learned more about where she had been in her career, I think both of us sat there going, oh my gosh, I want Charlene on my team. Like, obviously all of the places that she was working, not only did she take on work that people just were not interested in doing or seemed too challenging. It wasn't all like horrible stuff. Some of this stuff was like, how could I possibly do that? She just got the certifications. If anybody told her she needed this to move up, she got it. If she needed to take this class, if she needed to get this degree, if she needed to get this certification, if she had to take the worst project and make it happen, not only did she do it, but she did it in amazing ways. I think she told us that she got the first $1 million sponsorship of this convention center there. Was it the convention center?
Yeah, it was the convention center.
Yeah,
it was the idea that we could monetize our convention center with business relationships, right? Yeah.
Yeah. She noticed that in other, realms and other industries, and she brought a Pepsi contract to the Phoenix Convention Center. Funny that we're going to be at PMI Global, Matt, and it's going to be at that building. I almost want to take some pictures. You and I will send it to Charlene. We're here at the beginning.
I like that. I think especially if that Pepsi logo is still anywhere in the building, let's make sure that we grab it with that.
You're going to have to bring a couple cans of Pepsi or something on her behalf.
I think that awe-inspiringness from her, like you were saying, made us want her on our team. It made me even just want to go take her to lunch and talk to her more about everything, right? So, open invite on that when, again, she's in Orange County at this point, but she does have some connection still to Phoenix, which is where
She
I am.
does.
So yeah.
Yeah. In fact, that's another person. If you're not connected to Charlene on LinkedIn, you'll probably want to be. She is not like a conversationalist there, but to see all of the work that they do at the John Wayne International Airport, if you can just stop and think about what's all happening at an airport at any given time and the stakeholders again there that she's managing as the director, from airlines to vendors to sanitation staff to, the security teams to parking to everything, ads and how, she joined our episode. Do you remember? She was flushing toilets and she came to the episode saying, we just installed these new bathrooms and I just volunteered to go flush the toilets and make sure they all worked. I laughed. Oh, it was so great. I could just picture her going right back to that work. And that is completely what she is like. This person who is at the top, coming down and saying, hey, I'm going to link arms with everybody and do this same work. I'm going to get to know you. I'm going to make sure, just like Linda, did in her episode, I'm going to make sure your passions are being employed here. I'm going to hear you. This is how I motivate this group. It was similar to how David Doty motivated his community too, meeting with them one-on-one. Every single employee of that school district, it was like 4,500 people, in a year, meeting each of them personally, hearing their stories, understanding where they were coming from, giving them a voice, letting them join in the work. And I loved that. But she didn't only do that. She did give us some recommendations for when you are approaching the C-suite. Do you remember? She said, you can't delegate up. She said, if you want to come to the C-suite with a concern or you have an issue, come with some answers. Give us a recommendation. Don't tell me I'm supposed to solve the problem. You find it out. And she encouraged people. She mentors people continuously, not just women, but everyone, because she said it was our responsibility as leaders to bring others along with us who might not have the opportunity otherwise. And she made it her passion to help people get there to crack that glass ceiling, right?
Yeah, no, that's right. I think, leadership in general gets lots of complaints and lots of I needs. And I think the advice was come with the solution, right? Be the change agent and say, this is the problem. This is how I think we should tackle it. And clearly look at where it's gotten her in her career, right?
Totally. It was a great episode. I was so pleased that she was willing to be on our little podcast. It was such a wonderful treat to have her. We talked to 3 or 4 more guests since then. Gosh, you feel like we got through the whole episode. But one of our next guests was Fisayo Falarin. She was a project manager in Nigeria, and she was working with SaaS there and banking projects. And then she moved to Canada. I mean, from Africa to the North American continent. And it wasn't like she had to move, like there was a job and she had to take it. She just decided, I think I'm going to go there and then start my career over. And if you're in the middle of that experience yourself of moving from one career to another, whether you wanted to be doing that or you just find yourself doing that, or even you would like to do that, this episode is really for you.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful story, right? Where I want to be doing this. I'm going to put action to that want, right? To that desire, and then to move it forward. Her kind of idea of continuing to gain knowledge and then apply that, I think, is really what was able to let her be successful in making such a large transition happen.
Yeah, she did. And as we met her and learned about her commitment to curiosity and transparency and willingness to grow and communication was so clear, but we asked her what she thought her own superpower was, and she said reliability. And I don't know that we had heard that. I mean, it definitely is part of what all of these great PMs are doing, but it was a cool word to bring into the podcast season to be like, oh, reliability, constantly showing up and bringing, your David Doty skills, or, your AI, you're constantly knowing the AI, or you're always there doing the worst projects, or you are so precise, whatever your skill is, if you're reliable, that builds trust. And that was cool because everyone says, oh, you need to build trust. okay, building trust, how do I do that? And she, really told us about her reliability and how that built it amongst her teams.
Yeah, continuing to get it done is the best way to build trust, right? Is to come in
Right.
and just knock it out. So,
Right.
yeah.
Her passion for transparency was pretty impressive too. Always making sure everybody understood everything and being clear, if a project was falling behind or had some risks, moving into the red, she, was the first person to say, hey, we need to talk about this. This isn't going to be delivered on time. And here's why. And she shared with how easy that can make, communications over as you repeat them. As things happen, people begin to trust you that you understand what's going on. You have an organized approach to fix it. And this is what's going to be the new state. And that was an echo from Renee's episode too, because I just remembered one of the things that Renee said was that project managers are ethically bound to tell the truth at all times. And I don't know if it's something like an oath you take when you get your PMP or you sign off on it. I don't remember, but that statement was, I think that resonated with so many of our audience. I can think of people who I saw posting it, that it was compelling to them that, hey, I have to give a clear, transparent picture of all of the work happening that I'm responsible to manage and not gloss something over or put something under the rug or say it's going to be better than it is or it's worse than it is, no drama, no minimization. Like we have to tell the truth.
Yeah, no, I think that that level of transparency and commitment for Back to Visayo lent her to go from that entry level position all the way, up to be managing what work is being done within those organizations. So
yeah, that's a great call out.
Yeah.
That's how you reliability, trustworthiness, being clear and communicating well and just enjoying what you're doing. That can get you very far. We also spoke after that episode just recently with Agatha Agbanobi. She is an HR project manager. She loves getting comfortable in the fire. She feels comfortable there where she can just jump into situations where maybe there's some dissonance, maybe there's some misunderstanding, maybe there's some issues, and she can help resolve those things, whether it's organizationally or it's between people or it's on teams. And that was very unusual. I mean, it was actually a stopping point in the episode where I was like, wait, what? You enjoy that part of your day? It was incredible to me that she had that attitude and you could just see her kind of beaming like, yeah, I really do.
I think that even ties into that transparency, though, right? The idea is there is an issue we need to resolve. Let's get together. And while this may be uncomfortable in the moment, which not for her, right? But maybe for the other members associated with that, let's move it forward so that way we can have an equitable relationship and move whatever needle, the right direction that we need for our organizations. So,
yeah. And I'm glad you said equitable because her passion was for, employee relations, conflict resolution, workforce development, but also she led initiatives in DEIB. And, she talked about how that particular thread actually brought her to HR project management in the first place. She didn't really expect to land there, but because she had that passion, she brought that to her role. And then she was able to, do project work, do day-to-day work, to lead HR and DEIB projects, as her career path. That was very cool.
Yeah, it really was. Organizations that are able to work with her, I think, get a great ally in what that diversity and including all can do, right? How all of that different perspective can let you skyrocket up, I think. So,
yeah. And wouldn't you want to I would love to have someone like that, working with you where they can really bring that clarity to, well, this is how this group sees this, and this is how this group sees this, and this is how this group sees this, or just this person. And she said, there's a good reminder for project managers, you get that kind of quippy statement, like, get to know your team. She took that further to mean understand where they are when they're not at work. What are they doing? What is going on in their life? not everybody's open to sharing those pieces of information, but there's subtleties that make you understand, hey, this person has a lot going on outside of work. I don't necessarily know what it is, but they're not just here and they get in a locker and go to sleep and get up in the morning, right? They have other things happening outside that may, impact or trigger or upset things that are going on in your team. And we're working with humans here, not robots. It's a cool way to look at, there's deeper parts of the people that make up your project teams.
Yeah, I think that's a nice segue into our, bias toward action, but they acted on it, right? That's the whole principle, is you acknowledge, act on these ideas, and then you're able to move the process forward.
Yeah, and you're talking about our episode with Sanjeev Bhagat from Amazon. Oh my gosh, I can't believe he had time to be a part of our podcast. If you haven't listened to Sanjeev's episode, it was great. And I had to just step back and imagine, what is it? He manages program management at Amazon for their global logistics initiative projects. So it's not just being a program manager, you're actually managing all the program managers in that space. And global logistics, I mean, think of how many packages are going to end up on every doorstep just in your neighborhood today, and how those get from one country to another or one city to another, or what. It's just amazing the magnitude of things that they're accomplishing, not just with shipping and packaging, so many things.
It really is. One of the things, my wife will often do when a package is near our home is be like, 10 stops away. And you're like, you're just down the road. Like, if that's the logistics of what you have right here, then expand that to the world to think of that's what he's working through. It really is, kind of a daunting thought as far as that's concerned. I really like, though, how Amazon has pieces in play to make new solutions or to solve problems, right? It's not what should we do? Let's chart everything out. It's let's come up with a strong plan and test the waters and see if this will work. And if it does, we can move forward. And if not, let's take a step back and reevaluate at that point, right?
I loved his conversation about projects have to begin with a problem that you're trying to solve, and that Amazon is willing to throw everything out. If the problem is the process, let's dump it and come to a better solution instead of taping it up or, jumping to get a different tool or some other thing that we add on top of it. We may have to throw out the whole process that we're using and start with a new one. That was very cool. And the whole time he was talking, and audience, you'll have to tell us if you agree, do let us know in our comments of the show. But I think that Sanjeev's demeanor did not equal crazy global logistics projects.
No.
He's comfortable, at ease, everything's going fine. That even keel that he brought, we didn't even talk about that during the episode. It was just so obvious to me that he has this humility about him and he's not worried. He knows that if there's an issue that they can pivot and change, and they have a plan for that. And I loved the framework that Jeff Bezos had brought to their teams, that, hey, some of these decisions that are easy to make, because you can always backtrack and make a new decision, this 2-door decision or this 1-door decision, this is a 2-door decision. I can take it and I can feel kind of at ease. I'm being given permission to change it and go back to a new idea if it's not the one that works.
Yeah, I think that was one of my favorite episodes of the season. I think just from those practical, the practicality of the conversation as a whole.
Right.
But I hadn't really thought about that even keelness that he had until you just mentioned that. But you're right. What a easier way for the members of his team to be able to come up and say, hey, we have a problem, when somebody's not going to be like, what do you mean we have a problem? You just know that it's going to get solved. So,
Right. I could see why he got there. It was like, there was no hair on fire at all,
Right.
And it was funny, as I'm like, oh, here's Sanjeev, and he's the, program leader at Global Logistics. And there wasn't any air of, I manage all of this amazing stuff. Right. It was just like, I'm just a person here, and this is how we run these things, and I've done it reliably all along. And so I'm, the perfect person to be in this role. And it was cute that he talked about how they manage projects at home too, that his wife has the honey-do list, and he still uses the same kind of prioritization on that to decide my minimum regret framework about whether or not I get this project done at home.
I can only do these things. Where are we going to put them, right?
Yeah, which one is non-negotiable and which one can I put off to another day? That was a fun part of that episode. And then, of course, lastly, we talked with our own CEO, Steve West of Project Insight. And that was a really great episode. That was your idea, Matthew. I just want to throw that out to the audience that Matthew was like, we need to just interview Steve. And I think it was a great ask because just like in the NASA episode, and kind of a neat bookend to this whole season, was this is someone who's been part of the project management scene for more than 20 years and has designed a software tool, Project Insight, that really has project managers in mind. It's the whole reason that we have this podcast, because Project Insight has had this real desire to make the project manager's life easier and more powerful, right? To have these tools that make work easy and make you look great and help your companies do good business and succeed. And it was cool to hear him talk about how that software has developed over time.
Yeah, I think even mirroring the Sanjeev humbleness, that's something that Steve is the last person to gloat on what he's done. Although you're right, he's taken this concept of we were faxing documents and emailing things, previously, to now I have one central place to manage the granularity of a task all the way up to, the budget of a task, even all the way up to how that impacts my program or portfolio, not just my project as a whole. And it really was a wonderful conversation just to hear everything that we've gone through as a company, and then to hear kind of even some personal pieces from Steve, right? His approach to life and in general. So
yeah, I liked it. And I liked, I liked the nostalgia of this is how projects were accomplished 20 years ago and why tools became very necessary. How can we help people tell someone else that they're ready for them to start their part of the project? How can we help people mark something complete? How can we keep track of the time and the money and the, effort that's being poured into these projects so that we can report it and do it more efficiently and be more effective as an organization? And how that happened because of the things that were going on in the world, email was a thing, or the internet was a thing. And we no longer needed to have all of you young audience members, you have to think about this. You didn't have a browser-based software. You had a disk that you put into your computer and you could work on it in your local space. And, from there, the evolution of how technology has really advanced project management and continues to today. We talked about all of those advancements and how it just keeps taking us down into new pathways.
Yeah, I do think it was really full circle. I was actually at a conference recently where we were talking about leadership throughout the different generations, right? And this idea that the boomers who are still in the workforce, all the way to the latest generations who have grown up with a device and there's an app for that kind of approach, right? It's really kind of mind-boggling to think that these people are all in the workplace together, because that's how quickly we've, scaled the technology there. So.
Yeah, it was very cool. And now that you can have a complete picture of all the work happening across your company without having to dig through an email or without having to drive over a big stack of paper to your C-suite and put it all on a whiteboard. I mean, you can actually just click a button and have a real-time picture of everything that's going on and where you stand in budgets and resources and project progress and even your strategic initiatives. Recently at Project Insight, we're making that very clear for people that, hey, this is an organization's approach to what they want to be doing as a company today and 3 years from now and 10 years from now. And how does all this project work inform those the direction that the company wants to go. And it's giving a lot of people a great vision. And that's all been Steve's dream, right? Is to keep giving a more complete picture of the work so that your company can be successful and evolve and grow and step up to that next level. So all these people that have been part of our episodes have brought their A games to their work, and their organizations are thriving because of them. And so have all of you in our audience. Matthew and I just want to make a big shout out, whether you have a PMP or you're called a project manager, if you're listening to our podcast and you're doing project work at an organization, you bring talents to that organization and they are the better for it. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for all that you do in the workplace. Matthew, did you have any last remarks?
No, even I would say the only piece I would add to that last part is just the idea that maybe you are not a project professional and you're looking to get in that, and you're looking to transition and looking for more skill set, right? That's what that is. So we do appreciate everyone joining, and we look forward to next season. Really?
Yeah, we're excited for season 3. Shoot us a note. Say hi. It'll be a little bit. It'll be 2026, but we'll have it. We'll be back in January 2026. We're excited to see you all back. Have a great rest of the 2025. Thank you for joining us today on the Wear Your Cape to Work podcast, hosted by Project Insight. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, follow, or leave us a comment. If you subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or other favorite podcast channels, you'll receive notifications of all of our new episodes. We'd also love it if you would share Wear Your Cape to Work with your network of PMPs or anyone else who might enjoy the show. Project Insight is an online project and portfolio management software that helps companies connect project data from across all of their teams and software tools so that they can make confident decisions about their business. Our website is projectinsight.com, and there you can find many resources for project professionals, including free PDU webinars, as well as a place to register for a demonstration or a consultation with one of our success teams. Thank you once again for joining today's conversation, and most importantly, thanks for wearing your cape to work.